Hello everybody, Mr. Kunkel here. Today I want to talk to you about exponents. Uh, in this video we're just going to talk about really just the basics of exponents. If you feel like you have a good understanding of exponents, I would move on to another video, but it may not hurt to just kind of review this. So let's look at an exponent. If we have what we call 2 to the third power, our 2 is what we call our base, and this 3 here is what we call our exponent. Our exponent, you'll call this exponent, or we'll also say this 2 raised to the 3 power. So 2 to the third, 2 raised to the 3 power, 2 with the exponent of 3. These are all ways that we say this, but this here is our base, this is our exponent. So what does an exponent mean? An exponent tells us, it's a shorthand way of saying how many times we're going to multiply a number by itself. So in this case, we have 2 and we have an exponent of 3. So this 3 says that we're going to multiply 2 by itself 3 times. So if we were to write this out, we have 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 gives us 4. 4 times 2 gives us 8. So 2 times 2 times 2 is equal to 8. So that means 2 to the third power is equal to 8. Let's look at one more. 4 to the 2, or we can say, in this case, we can say 4 squared. This would be 2 cubed. Outside that, we'll really hear like 2 to the 4th power, 2 to the 5th power, but this is going to be 4 squared, or 4 to the 2 to the 2nd power. So, as we said, this 2 tells us how many times we multiply 4 by itself. So this would be 4 times 4, which is equal to 16. That's really all we need to know about exponents. You take this number and multiply it by itself however many times this number says. So if we have 5 to the third, that would be 5 times 5 times 5. That's 25 times, that'd be 125. 25 times 5 gives us 125. And even in cases like 1 to the 6th, that's 1 times 1 times 1, 6 times. We always know 1 times 1 gives us 1, so 1 to the 6th would end up giving us 1. But we can write that out. And that's really all there is to know. The big thing, the only place where this is going to start getting complicated with our just base regular exponents is whenever we're talking about a negative base. Say you have negative 2 to the third power. Well, first we're going to do a little investigation into how negatives in our powers affect each other. So let's look at negative 1 to the first, negative 1 to the 2, negative 1 to the 3, negative 1 to the 4. So let's look at these. This is just negative 1 times itself, so that will give us negative 1. This is negative 1 times negative 1, which would give us positive 1. Negative 1 to the third, that's negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 would give us positive 1. Multiply that by negative 1, we end up back at negative 1. Negative 1 to the fourth. We write that out. Negative 1 times negative 1 gives us positive 1. Multiply by negative 1. Positive times negative gives us a negative. Negative 1 times negative 1 gives us back to positive 1. So if you look, and we can continue on with this trend, but we're going to look and see if we notice a pattern. Negative 1 to the first gives us negative 1. Negative 1 squared equals 1. Negative 1 cubed equals negative 1. Negative 1 to the fourth equals 1. What kind of pattern do we notice here? Well, what we should be looking for, what we should notice, is anytime we have an odd power, we end up with a negative. Anytime we have an even power, we end up with a positive. So this is using negative 1 because negative 1 is an easy example because anytime you multiply 1 by itself, it gives you the same answer. But this using a -1 lets us really identify this trend of negative, positive, negative, positive. If we do -1 to the 5th, you can multiply those out. This is +1 times -1. So that's -1. These two give us +1, and then these two give us -1 again. So -1. And then we see that continue. Due to the 6, you can start keying these on a calculator if you'd like. -1 to the 6 will give you +1. So knowing this, anytime we have an odd exponent, we should get a negative. So odd exponent gives us a negative answer. And then an even exponent gives a positive answer. But we're still going to work these the same way. So -2 to the 3rd, that's -2 times -2 times -2. This is +4. +4 times -2 gives us -8. So just like we saw here, 2 to the 3rd gave us 8. -2 to the 3rd gives us -8 because we have an odd power, but 2 times 2 times 2 is still 8, but since it's negative. And then let's look at -4 squared. -4 times -4. Negative times negative gives us positive, so that's +16. So that's our basics on exponents and how we deal with a negative base.